Good morning, class. What's new with you today? I hope you are enjoying your day. So lend me your ears for our discussion. But first, let me play a video presentation for all of you.
Indigenous peoples have their own set of social, economic, and political systems. They speak a different language, have a different culture, and have different beliefs. The state has marginalized them and discriminate against them.
As unique peoples, they maintain and develop their original surroundings and systems.
Indigenous peoples account for 15% of the world's extreme poor owing to discrimination. They also have greater rates of landlessness, hunger, and internal displacement than other people groups around the world.
Indigenous peoples have limited access to education and lower educational quality than other populations. Their education frequently lacks curricula and teaching approaches that acknowledge the histories, cultures, local languages, and traditional knowledge of their communities.
As a future educator, let us support the indigenous people anywhere in the planet. Let us create an environment that is safe for indigenous students to feel comfortable and proud to share information about their culture and history.
Indigenous people made huge contribution in this country. The biggest is in sharing land and resources. People need to see and understand that indigenous people should be viewed as the founding people of this land.
To the indigenous people, don't be discouraged because to the person who understand you, you are smart and strategic person. I am admiring you because I can see what is being a simple and a practical person.
We must respect each other's right to choose a collective destiny and the opportunity to develop the legal and political rights for indigenous and non-indigenous peoples so that we may enjoy the right to maintain our culture, our heritage, and our land as a Filipino.
That even in the face of inhumanity, we should treat indigenous people just like we wanted to be treated.
The value of indigenous communities needs to be recognized, their participation in the society supported.
Indigenous people are often marginalized and face discrimination in our country. Human rights defenders who speak out face intimidation.
Indigenous people's contributions are essential in designing and implementing solutions for ecosystem.
We should respect, love, acknowledge, support the indigenous people.
So that's the video presentation. So we will now proceed to our discussion, which is the indigenous people in Northern Philippines. These are the learning objectives. By the end of this lesson, the learners should have identified each of the indigenous groups in northern part of the Philippines and should able to determine the problems and issues of indigenous peoples in northern communities, and lastly, appreciate the culture, beliefs, and practices of different ethnic groups. In these trying times, we must rise against the storm as a people. We must not allow our children and the people to be fed with injustice or clothed with fear. It is according to an ignorant leader from the Cordilleras of the Philippines, which is Windel Bulinget. Let's now proceed to our first discussions.
Good day. I am Nualame M. Neo, and as we go on, indigenous peoples often lack formal recognition over their lands, territories, and natural resources, are often last to receive public investments in basic services and infrastructure, and face multiple barriers to participate fully in the formal economy, enjoy access to justice, and participate in political processes and decision making. Much of the land occupied by indigenous people is under customary ownership, and yet many governments recognize only a fraction of the this land as formally or legally belonging to indigenous peoples, even when indigenous territories and lands are recognized, protection of boundaries or external parties, use of natural resources are often weak. So indigenous peoples, distinct cultures, and the possibility of determining their own development and future will become eroded.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ana Riza G. Ainera, and I'll be talking about the continuation of Miss Noela May Neo's report on indigenous people. We often subscribe to their customary leaders and organizations for representation that are distinct or separate from those of the mainstream society or culture. Many indigenous people still maintain a language distinct from the official language or languages of the country or region in which they reside. Indigenous people are accustomed to following their traditional leaders and organizations which represent their basic social culture. Other indigenous peoples, on the other hand, continue to speak a language that is distinct from the national languages.
The Philippines consists of a large number of indigenous ethnic groups living in the country. They are the descendants of the original inhabitants of the Philippines. They were not absorbed by centuries of Spanish and United States colonization of the Philippines archipelago, and in the process have retained their costumes and traditions. So, meaning to say, there are various indigenous Filipino ethnic groups and tribes in the Philippines. And as we know here in the Philippines, we have the Igorot, Mangyan, Negrito, and so on. Also, the indigenous people have rich and ancient cultures and view their social, economic, environmental, and spiritual systems as interdependent. They make valuable contributions to the world's heritage, thanks to their traditional knowledge and their understanding of ecosystem management.
Good day to all. My name is Jake Steven Lopo. Technically, the Aplang tribal groups were a blend in ethnic origin like other Filipinos, although they did not as a rule have as much contact with the outside world. The tribal groups of the Philippines are known for their carved wooden figures, basket, weaving, pottery, and weapons.
Good day everyone. Today I'm going to discuss about the ethnic groups. By the way, I am Jenny Nemo, your discussant for today. So, ethnic groups range from various Igorot tribes, a group that includes the Bontoc, Ibaloy, Ifugao, Isneg, Kalinga, Kankanaey, and Tingin, who built the rice terraces. They also covered a wide spectrum in terms of their integration and acculturation with lowland Christian and Muslim Filipinos. This particular ethnic group are accustomed in farming because this will serve as their occupation and their source of food on a daily basis. Ethnic groups in northern Philippines usually wear what they call tapis as their dress. In Ibaloy, music is important so that they have instruments like nose flute, native guitar, drums, gongs, and many more. They are considered sacred and must always be played for a reason, such as Kanao Feast. This is a ceremony for illness, good harvest, and for progress. It is a festival, a liturgy, and offering where animals are offered in thanksgiving. In marriages, healing, birth, burial, or voyage, a prayer is offered. So this will be the end of my discussion in ethnic groups. I hope you gained some learnings. Thank you for listening.
There were several indigenous groups living in the Cordillera Central Luzon in 1990. At one time, it was employed by lowland Filipinos in a pejorative sense, but in recent years, it came to be used with pride by native groups in the mountain region as a positive expression of their ethnic identity. Filipinos used to complain that they were damaging our country's image because of their cultural and religious differences. Because of their distinct culture, they are now regarded as one of our country's assets. They have also contributed significantly to our country's tourism industry.
Our rice terraces system is irrigated rice terraces in the mountain of North Central Luzon, Philippines, that were created more than 2,000 years ago by the Ifugao people, Although located in several villages, they are collectively known as the Banawe Rice Terraces. The Snag of Apayao live in the northern Cordillera of Luzon, the largest island of the Philippines. The Snag were notorious for headhunting and were among the last of the Cordilleran peoples to be brought under colonial control. Ilongot recognized a range of supernatural beings including a creator, overseer, deity associated with the sun as well as ancestral spirits. They are most concerned, however, with nature spirits and illness-giving spirits.
It has been reduced to a small population living in widely scattered locations, primarily along the eastern ranges of the mountains. Negritos is the collective term to refer the Filipino. Indigenous peoples with a hunter-gatherer background. The number of indigenous peoples in the Philippines is unknown, but it is estimated that between 10% and 20% of the country's population. In the 1990s, there were more than 100 highlands tribal groups constituting approximately 3% of the population. The upland tribal groups were a blend in ethnic origin like other lowland Filipinos, although they did not have contact with the outside world.
Igorot tribes from the northern Philippines. The indigenous people living in the northern part of the country are called the Igorots, whereas those non-Muslim indigenous tribes living in the south are referred to as Lumad. The Igorot, which comprises numerous tribes in the northern part of the country, are most residing in the mountain ranges of the Cordillera region. They are popularly known for being rice cultivators. An assortment of the group called the Ifugaos built the Banawi rice terraces, frequently called the eighth wonder of the world. The ancestor of this indigenous tribe carved a system of irrigated rice terraces in the mountains of Ifugao more than 2,000 years ago. Igorot, one of various ethnic groups in the mountain of northern Luzon, Philippines, all of whom keep or have kept until recently their traditional religion and way of life. Some live in the tropical forests of the foothills but must leave rugged grassland and pine forests zone higher up.
The Igorot tribes also includes the Bontoc, Ibaloy, Isneg, Kalinga, Kankanae, and Tinguian groups. Other tribes living in the north are Isang from Apayao, Gadang found between Kalinga and Isabela provinces, and the Ilonggots living within the east mountains of Luzon called the Sierra Madre and the Caraballo Mountains. The Ilonggots are known for their intense aggressiveness and cultural conservatism. So the groups that I have mentioned are also known as the Igorot tribes. Igorot are any of various ethnic groups in the mountains of this region, all of whom keep their traditional religion and way of life. Some live in tropical forests of the foothills, but most live in rugged grassland and pine forest zones higher up. And they were known in earliest days for their wars and practice of headhunting. The Ilonggots are most notable for their headhunting and traditional way of hunting as well. They use various arms that are considered as primitive but very effective.
Good morning, students. My name is Gomer El Dacoco. So, indigenous people in northern part of the Philippines. One of the indigenous group that you can find in northern part of the Philippines are the Talandig tribe. The Talandigs are one of the indigenous groups in the province of Bukidnon, who has continued to preserve and promote its indigenous customs, beliefs, and practices despite the strong influx, modernization, and changes. We all know how modernized our earth with lots of new inventions that can affect our daily lives, especially our own culture. But even how modernized our world is, the Talandig tribe will always value their old culture and they will never replace any of their culture.
So good morning class, I'm Arden Leron and I will discuss the problems and issues of indigenous peoples. First is health. We all know that indigenous peoples can be found at the rural areas. They cannot be able to give them vitamins, cannot be able to support them with health services. Because of that, it affects a person's health, especially for pregnant women. Second is education. Absence of education is the indigenous people's most important challenge. For a number of reasons, most of them were illiterate because they are in the upland. They are tough to approach. It is difficult for teachers from urban regions to travel to their location. Last is poverty. That is one of the dominant problems that they experience. They are the poorest provinces, more popularly known as Club 20. So for today's activity, make a word cloud about the word indigenous, and for your assignment, based on the discussion, make a reflection paper on what you've understand about the indigenous people in northern Philippines in 1 to 2 paragraphs only. That's the end of our discussion, and I hope you've learned about our topics, which is the indigenous people in northern Philippines. Have a great day.